Thank you very much, Tracy. Now, we've got quite a lot of people here, which those of you in internet land can't see, but we've got Jess, we've got Richard, we've got Michelle, we've got Tara and Melissa and Tracy as well. And so I'm going to invite as many of you as will fit in this space. And I've got a number of questions that we've gathered over the course of the day, questions that haven't been answered yet. So if we get 5 chairs, oh yeah, the 5, yep. So can we get Tara and Melissa and Michelle and Jess and Richard up, please? And I'll get out of the way, and we will have to pass the microphone between people.
Talking stick.
The talking stick. Thank you. So just bear with us while we rearrange the furniture and the people.
Zoom out at all?
Zoom out a little bit. No, that's sort of like, yeah, it's a bit of a focus.
Put Richard in the middle of his hand.
Thank you, Tracy.
Are you nervous? Am I? Yeah. Squeeze her in. It's on that video.
I got half of it. Just because I'm in a pretty dress.
Or you can just like lie across.
Yeah. I'm a coach right here.
No, we just stand there. That's right. All right.
So who's reading the question? Oh, you're reading the question.
I'll read out questions, and we can go on for as long as you can stand it. When you've had enough, do let us know. How's the sound going here? Is there a way of checking the sound, or the beat?
There we go, Sam.
It's still going.
It's still
Are we
going?
going to hold this?
Yeah, it's going to be a weird angle with the light coming in from the door. It is a little bit weird.
How about you just stick it up there?
Are you doing that?
Yeah, I'll fumble around here. I'm going to start with Michelle. And one of the most recent
speaking,
questions
just
that came
turn it
in
on
was, Michelle, how do you change negative self-talk into positive, especially around diet slips?
What a great question. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, I will grant you, but it's completely doable. A word that you might know is an affirmation. And an affirmation is a positive saying that we say to ourselves when we want to reinforce the positive mindset that we're after. So one way to deal with negative self-talk is to just try and ignore it and to give yourself some positive self-talk to replace it with. So it's a great thing to, even though it feels weird, to practice it in the mirror. So to look at yourself in the eyes, basically, and say whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. So it might be, I love low-carb eating, and I'm so excited to do it again today. Anything along those lines that resonates with you, to remind yourself over and over. There's a more brutal technique if you want it, which is called thought stopping. And if you're a chronic negative thinker, this one might be more up your alley than the happy self-talk concept. Some people like to punish themselves. That's okay. Get an elastic band, put it around your wrist. I'm not kidding. And every time you have a negative thought that you don't want, you ping it. And focusing on the ouch stops you having that negative thought immediately. You've cut it off. And then you're laughing at yourself and it's painful and you're moving on with life. If you want to take that one step further, you can replace the ouchy elastic band concept with the idea of saying to yourself quite sternly, stop. Once you've focused on saying stop and getting it stern without yelling and scaring your colleagues if you said it out loud, instead of in your head, that I've done that before. Stop. So by the time I've concentrated on doing that, I've stopped my thought, whatever it was. If I was thinking I really can't do this and I'm starving and I need cake, I don't know where examples about cake. I don't actually like cake. I'm actually like a chocolate person, but all my examples are.
Just disagree.
I know, right? It's totally weird. Anyway, stop. I've got this. I'm going to focus on getting a drink of bubbly water because that makes me happy. I'm like Liz, I like my water with bubbles in it. So there's a couple of techniques. One is a bit more self-nurturing and one's a bit more brutal, but to be honest, I think the brutal one works really well, with or without the elastic band.
A lot of contemporary psychology is actually about compassion and mindfulness. Any comments about that? Would anyone like to comment about self-compassion?
Well, some people really do learn that the fire's hot by actually having to jump in it. Unfortunately, I have 4 children, and unfortunately, I've got one child that must learn things that way, and she happens to be my type 1 diabetic. So it's very interesting sometimes and she's also 15, but that's, so it's a triple whammy. She's got to learn that the fire's hot by touching it. Everybody learns so differently. And I'm blessed to understand that because I have 4 very, very individual children.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on. One of the questions that popped up is, what is the list of foods, seeds and nuts allowed?
Okay, so we did reference this magical food list a few times that we give to our patients. So I suppose the way it works is we have different types of food lists depending on what diet that person's going to go on. So if they're going on a strict elimination protocol, there's going to be different foods to just like a flexible low carb diet. So if the person asking this question was just keen for a flexible low carb diet, then absolutely nuts and seeds would be a part of that. That's no issue at all because they are low in carb, they've got healthy proteins and fats, and they're a whole food. But if we're talking about phase 1 of a strict elimination protocol, we wouldn't have nuts and seeds on that. We don't actually have that in phase 2 either, but we always try to build people up back to the flexible low carb diet. So we're never just keeping people in these stricter elimination protocols, unless of course they want to stay there because their symptoms are so much better when they're there, and when they try to bring those other foods back in, it just sort of reignites their symptoms, whatever they may be. So yes, nuts and seeds are low carb friendly if you're being flexible and you don't have gut issues or autoimmune issues that you're dealing with.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's one hopefully with a simple answer. Electrolytes flavoured with erythritol, would you avoid? Now, I'm sure there's actually possibly quite a long discussion that we could have about artificial or, sweeteners like erythritol. And I suspect that discussion won't be happening. But would someone like to, perhaps several people might like to talk to that subject?
Up to you.
Okay. Well, there's a number of different sweeteners, and they all have different biochemical effects. Erythritol is probably the least worst artificial sweetener. So I personally use sucralose in coffee. I have an espresso every morning, and it always has, I have sucralose in it. I've tried having it without sucralose and without any sweetener, and I can do it, but I don't enjoy it. So for that, the small amount, because these mimics of sweetness on the sun are extremely potent. They're like 300 times more sweeter than sugar. The actual amount of chemical in your body compared to the amount of chemical in your body you would have for a teaspoon of sugar is 1/300th of the amount. So it's a very small perturbation, potentially. Electrolytes, if you're having electrolytes a lot, like you sweat a lot and you have an erythritol sweetened electrolyte, that dose is going to build up a lot more. So it depends on how you're using it, but I personally don't have a problem with small amounts of sweeteners. I tend to find also that as you get on a low carb diet, your sense of taste changes. And so something that, so you see a lot that a lot of commercial products that is designed for people going low carb are designed for people who are just going low carb. So they're really quite sweet with artificial sweeteners. And people who've been keto for over 6 months can't tolerate this. You know, one of these fake donut things is absolutely sweet as, and you know, tastes horrible because it's so sweet. That's aimed at getting the people who haven't developed that acclimate, or haven't acclimated to a less sweet diet. So anyway, I personally, I think from a biochemical point of view, I don't have a problem with most of the artificial sweeteners.
Michelle, would you like to? We can pass and get a range of opinions about artificial sweeteners, because I'm sure they're actually within this group there would be quite a different range of opinions. So let's just keep passing the microphone along.
I'm really curious to hear what the nutrition and coaching take on this is. My own take is, that's such a hard question. From a performance psychology perspective and from a change management perspective, on the one hand, I want to say anything that gets you to make this change to not go back to all your habits is great. But on the other hand, what are you trying to achieve? And if you're just going to replace the M&Ms with a homemade dessert that has erythritol in it instead, whilst I understand that there are clear advantages to the homemade one with the erythritol in it instead, the habit that I have to have dessert and that I can't feel complete and my night isn't happy unless I've had dessert, that's where I've got an issue. So I think fantastic for special occasions and for those moments when we want to be in it like everyone else, you know, when we want to have cake too. Cake again. But I would suggest a note of caution, because a very, very big part of this is going to our new way of behaving. And do we want to be the person that has to have dessert every night, and if we don't, we won't feel like we're satisfied? I'm not so sure about that one. That's my take.
Jess? Cool. Just to clarify, so erythritol and sugar alcohols are non-nutritive sweeteners. They're not artificial sweeteners. So artificial sweeteners are things that are man-made, whereas these erythritols and things like this, they come from carbohydrates, right, Richard? They're sugar alcohols, and then stevia would also be another non-nutritive sweetener. So yeah, they're in a lot of low-carb foods. They're in electrolytes, like the question was about. And I think it just comes back to, like, what are your priorities? Because if someone really needs electrolytes and this is the only way they can get electrolytes in, then it's going to be a net positive. So with erythritol, especially if you don't have gut issues, it can be perfectly fine, no issue whatsoever. Whereas some people will get immediate gut reaction with sugar alcohols. So it really depends. It's very individual, but it depends what your priorities are. That would be my answer.
I'm just going to agree with all of those sentiments. My favourite answer is it depends. It depends on what your outcome is. It depends on whether you're trying to break a habit. It depends on how you react to that. For my family, we don't use them, except when my daughter is cooking at school, and school have been very good in adjusting her cooking recipes to be keto. And when they really want to do cheesecake, I relent on the erythritol. Special occasions.
Let's hear it for keto cheesecake.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much the same, and I can probably take bits from everyone, and that's what I apply to my discussions with my clients in my clinic room. One of the things to keep in mind is that high levels of whether they're natural or artificial sweeteners would be that there is a connection between high use of those products and obesity, and we're still working out what that means metabolically, and we do believe it has to do with something to do with the insulin model, and that the body thinks that it's actually receiving calories, so the body gears up to receive those calories. Those calories don't come, and then we have an insulin spike, a glucose drop, and then we get a sugar craving. So my stance is very much a bit from everybody, but if someone's having high amounts, it's definitely an encouragement to reduce them. from the habit forming, from the craving point of view, and also from the metabolic point of view. And perhaps they are better than sugar, but they're not particularly completely a saint in that regard. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, we're going to do a quick change of topic, and I'm going to hand this back to you, Tara. Someone did ask a question for Tara, and this is a tricky one. This is going to put you on the spot. As an accredited diabetes educator, how do you manage the Diabetes Australia recommendations and the low-carb keto nutritional approach, which are not aligned?
Yeah, this is a really good question and something that I talk about amongst my colleagues as well. For me, not being a dietitian, I can't prescribe diets, and I don't even try to prescribe diets. What I do like to do is teach people about their food, so they see food the way that I see food. And I see food in macronutrient proportions first, because that's what has the biggest impact on blood glucose levels. And everyone has their own glucose intolerance when they're diagnosed with diabetes. And here I'm probably largely talking about type 2 diabetes in terms of someone's glucose intolerance. So for example, I can have someone sit in front of me who can have a banana as a mid-morning snack. They may have a modest blood glucose rise of perhaps up to 8 or 9, and then it would come back down. And we can see this through the use of CGM devices and 24-hour glucose monitors. I could have someone else who could have a banana with type 2 diabetes, and their blood sugar can spike up to 20 and sit there for 2 hours. So for me, it's always, okay, where are we at now? How can I impart my knowledge about nutrition onto these people and what the impact of the foods that they eat have on their blood sugar levels? Then I'll equip them with either a blood glucose monitor or a continuous glucose monitor, and I allow them to do a food diary with what they're coming back with in terms of their blood glucose response to a particular food, and I allow them to eat amongst what they do and tweak it with their newfound knowledge of the impacts of different foods on their blood glucose. And then I'll hand over to a dietitian where perhaps I'm feeling that they are then becoming deficient somewhere else, and sort of hand back over to them. So really for me, I don't sit down and say to someone, right, we're going to talk about low carb. No, I say to them, let's find out your carbohydrate intolerance. Let's learn about nutrition and let you guide yourself. And one of my biggest bugbears about standard nutritional advice for type 2 diabetes is, even just 2 weeks ago, I sat down with this client who I've worked with for many years, and she went on to insulin, and she, with type 2 diabetes, and, she's a very intelligent lady, and she will eat a piece of grain bread for breakfast, and she'll have a banana, and she'll have a coffee with milk. And she was still having her insulin dose, but no matter, within that realm of what we would expect to be a healthy breakfast, she was getting blood sugar spikes of 15. The endocrinologist wasn't happy. And it wasn't until she says to me, but it's a healthy breakfast. And I just said, well, is it? If your blood sugar is climbing, is it a healthy breakfast for you? You tell me. Don't let a book tell you. Don't let a cookie cutter model of nutrition tell you if that's healthy for you. Yes, a banana has vitamins and minerals and fibre, dare I say it to you in front of Liz. But if it's for the sake of your blood sugar, we need to question this, and we need to actually find something's best for you. And once I actually sat down to her and explained to her that a piece of bread breaks down to sugar in her blood, she almost cried. And I don't know why we're withholding this information from people. Just explaining to her what a starch was, and chemically that starch is just glucose. The light bulb went on, and she said, why hasn't anyone told me this before? Anyway, I feel like I've spoken too much on it, but I could speak for days about that. So my approach is individual, and I don't prescribe diets. I let people's bodies tell them what their tolerance is with carbohydrates.
That's lovely, thank you very much. Now I'm going to throw out a word, and the word is fructose. There's been quite a lot of feedback on the Q&A page, and actually somebody did email me, and I'm going to pitch this question at Melissa. Now, I did have a big long rant prepared about FODMAPs, and this person is afflicted with fructose intolerance. And fructose is one of those FODMAPs intolerances, and for people with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, it can be really an awful experience. So what I might do is ask Melissa and then Jess to give their thoughts. There's a lot more that we could be saying about fructose, and I'm sure that Richard would have a few things to say about fructose and fatty liver. But let's just see how we go with time, and we'll start off with Melissa.
So we're just talking about fructose in general?
Well, FODMAPs intolerance and
FODMAPs
IBS and how you might approach that problem, and then we'll find out what Jess might suggest.
Okay, well, I'm probably going to take more of a route of talking about IBS and SIBO, because that's where we see a lot of FODMAPs come up. If you go to your GP and you have IBS, they're going to say, try a FODMAPs diet. And what we're seeing that is about 60 to 70% of IBS is actually SIBO, or small intestine bacterial overgrowth, which is kind of nice because you have a name for something that can be worked with, whereas IBS, you're sent away. It's like you've got IBS, you just need to live with it, try a FODMAP diet.
Take the antidepressant, see a psychologist.
Yes. But SIBO is something we can work with. It's dietary, but it's gut healing as well. There's bacteria involved. We can test for it. There's things that can be worked with there. So I think it's not enough to say, oh, I'm intolerant to FODMAPs, because that's not the end of the story. Some of those FODMAPs can be important in feeding important gut bacteria, which also produce butyrates, which feed your colon cells and keep your colon healthy. And of course, there's a lot of controversy even in this room today about prebiotics and fiber and low carb and everything. But my take on it is that there's a certain amount that we probably do need. We're unsure of what the research is saying, but when it comes to FODMAPs, it's not enough to say I have a FODMAPs intolerance and leave it there. We need to start working with why you have a FODMAPs intolerance, improving your FODMAPs intolerance, and then expanding your diet back out again, because in the microbiome world, diversity is key. If you don't have a diverse diet, you don't have a diverse microbiome. So it's really important to start working on the why of the FODMAPs. Why do you have a FODMAPs intolerance?
Okay, thank you. Jess?
So a low FODMAP diet is like the first thing that's recommended for most people with gut issues, and you're probably the same. A lot of people come into my office, assessment number 1, and they're like still on their low FODMAP diet 7 years later.
And frustrated.
And they're like, they still have to check their little FODMAP app to see what they can and can't eat, because it's such a confusing diet.
Less foods.
Less
and less foods.
Yeah. So, I mean, the low FODMAP diet has some relevance in the sense that it reduces fermentable carbohydrates. And a lot of people I noticed in clinic that was actually getting benefit were actually just reducing carbohydrates. And so it's a type of lower carb diet for some people who do it in a particular way. So it can get benefit in that sense. But we find it a practically difficult diet to do. We obviously learn about low FODMAP diets as a dietitian. And I tried it myself and I just found this is confusing. Is there another way? And so the other thing to think about is that people with inflammatory gut issues, it's not just fermentable carbohydrates that could be contributing to the inflammation. So for example, if someone has a deficiency in long-chain omega-3 fats, their omega-6 to 3 ratio is out of balance, they've got too much omega-6s, not enough omega-3s, that can drive inflammation, and that can drive inflammation in the gut. If someone's got a really stressful job and they're just like constantly indoors, not getting enough vitamin D, that can drive gut dysbiosis and gut inflammation. So we Tom and I like to think about it as like a stress bucket. So you've got this stress bucket and you've got all these things going in contributing to the bucket. And when you get these GI symptoms, that's the bucket like overflowing. And so low FODMAP is like one of those things that can empty the bucket from the other end, but there's so many other things you can do that are in your control.
I'm going to throw my 2 cents worth in. The impression that I get is that that FODMAPs intolerance and fructose intolerance is about damage to the lining of the small bowel, and you need to ask yourself what sort of things are contributing to that. For example, lots of medications, antibiotics, proton pump inhibitors, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. You've mentioned stress, and it's a condition of carbohydrate intolerance. And I'm just going to share my little story. It's that many years ago, like decades ago, I realised that I was onion intolerant. And onions are a source of fructose, which are also found in wheat. And at that stage, I just basically cut out onion because I knew if I ate onion pretty reliably the next day, I'd need to lie down, have a good burp and a good fart, and have someone rub my tummy. So, you know, IBS symptoms. And those symptoms are much less familiar these days. I hardly get them. But from around 2014, I started doing a lot of gut healing things, and Melissa is really the gut healing queen. And things like broth and omega-3s, there's a whole range of things. The meat-based diet all help with healing the lining of your small bowel. And these days I find I can actually tolerate onion and not live in fear of the following day. So that's my little story. I kind of think that if your gut is carbohydrate intolerant, it's telling you something. And you can either look at it as, oh my God, I'll have to go on this awful restrictive diet. Or you can go, oh, hooray. Here's an opportunity to heal my gut. And by the way, your overall health will probably improve as a result. And yes, you can then start reintroducing those things. But you might well find that the things that you thought you desperately missed, by the time you've done all that gut healing, aren't that important anymore. Anyway, that's my take. Richard, would you like to add anything?
So I just make a comment about fibres, and so we want to get into that comment.
Oh, we've had that
I'm going to go there. Yeah,
We've had that conversation, but by all means.
So one of the things that's been observed about fibre, of course, is that the microbiome will take undigested carbohydrates and convert them into short-chain fatty acids locally. The reason the microbe is doing that is as a storage of potential energy that it can get to later on. But of course, we can actually utilise that. And the enterocytes that are lining the gut is their favoured form of, well, actually, we believed for a while it was their favoured form of nutrition above glucose. But it turns out that the metabolic pathway for how our cells metabolize butyric acid is they first of all hydrolyze it into hydroxybutyric acid, which you know is a ketone, and then they turn it into acetoacetate, and they turn it into acetyl-CoAs, and then it goes into the Krebs cycle. So the pathway that our cells use to take these short-chain fatty acids is via beta-hydroxybutyrate, via ketones. So the question then becomes, if these cells like that, and we know that these cells, when fed butyric acid, are less likely to have bowel cancer, and there's a whole bunch of things that you can look at there. And they seem to be happy and healthier when they're fed this. Should they be fed it from the outside or from the inside? Should they be fed from the lumen, from the gut, or should they be fed from the basolateral side, from the blood? So if our blood is carrying beta-hydroxybutyrate, we are in our blood carrying the favoured food for our enterocytes. So, it's interesting. Maybe we don't need fibre at all if we're low carb.
Which is pretty much the conclusion that I reached, that if a low carbohydrate diet can be no fibre, low fibre or high fibre, does fibre matter? And maybe if you've got a good whole food diet, maybe it's not so important. Which brings me to the next question that somebody submitted about fermented low-carb foods. Now, I think perhaps we'll just talk about fermented foods in general. Would you recommend them and how often? And again, I'd like to start with Melissa.
Say it depends.
Okay.
Sure. Because we're all different.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm a big proponent of fermented foods. I absolutely love them. I think they're great for your gut health. They're a great food source. But what if you're histamine intolerant? Then you can't eat any of it. What if you have a problem with sulfur? You definitely can't eat sauerkraut. So it really does depend. For people who are able to eat as much fermented food as they like, I recommend, between a teaspoon and a tablespoon a day. But I tend to recommend staying away from things like kombucha unless you make it yourself, because a lot of them are high sugar. They don't ferment them long enough. But yeah, it depends.
Yeah, so people usually go for fermented stuff because they're going to have probiotics and things like that in them. So you don't have to include them in your diet. There's other ways you can get those nutrients. We don't tend to actually go out and recommend them. So the way that we as dietitians work, we don't do any gut microbiome testing or anything like that. We go based off people's symptoms and people's blood tests. And get them to the point where they're essentially symptom-free and their metabolic markers, their inflammatory markers, their vitamins and minerals look good. And we haven't had to use any fermented products to do that. Usually it's the opposite. People have come in and they're taking all these fermented foods left, right, and center, and it's not working for them, or it's not necessarily doing any harm, but it's also not necessarily doing any good either. And it probably just, again, it depends on the person that you're seeing, because people coming to see us have a lot of chronic diseases. It's not just like, oh, I've got a little bit of bloating and that's my only issue. They have a lot of overlapping things with varying priorities. And so, yeah, I suppose my answer, what was the question?
Foods, would you recommend them and how?
Would I recommend them? Okay, yeah, so the answer to that is no, I don't recommend them. It's not that I have anything against them, but I don't find that they're necessary for most people. Getting them to the goals that they have. But it's not to say that they're harmful and people can't have them either.
Okay, look, thank you very much for input, everybody. And it's 4:30, so we're actually going to wrap up the day here. We've had a big day. We have an even bigger day tomorrow. We're starting, I think, at 8:30 with Tara, talking about type 1 diabetes. And then that will lead into a panel, I guess an informal group discussion about managing type 1 diabetes and how not to bust your blood sugars with breakfast. Then we will have a range of discussions. We've got the bigger picture on health, looking at sustainability issues. We've got neuromyto keto. We have our very special guest zooming in from Sydney, Dr. Pran Yoganathan. We have more panel discussions, including a panel discussion on family-friendly keto, family-friendly low carb, I should say, which is bound to generate plenty of discussion because there'll be lots of different perspectives, because it depends. Yes, we've got Matt and Patrick Ryan in that bigger picture. We're also launching a poll, and the question is, what low carb topics are most important or relevant to you? And that's there now. You can, how does it work? Would one of our tech guys like to tell me how it works?
Just gives a breakdown by topic.
In the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what do they have to press? Yes, is there something that?
Well, most people have already voted already, so
All right.
I'm very proactive in filling that
But
out.
for people that need to know how to do it, where do they find it? Where do they do it?
So I believe it comes up on your screen, just like it has for us.
Yeah.
And you just select which of the topics are of interest to you.
And you can select
And-
any or one or.
Multiple, yeah. So that's a bit of feedback to us, and that might cue some of our Q&A tomorrow.
And Kim, any type 1 diabetics, if there are discussion topics that they would like us to try and fit in, or if there's ones that, and we'd like to see what topics type 1 diabetics would like us to talk about tomorrow. There may be some that we don't feel comfortable talking about in a group that might be more personalised, but if there are topics that we see a couple of topics that look similar, we will discuss them in our panel, because we've got about an hour. We've got half an hour. Yeah, we've got about an hour worth of discussion time, all centred around type 1 diabetes.
Fantastic. I want to thank all of you for your input today, and I hope that all the people that we can't see out there in internet land have enjoyed these conversations and presentations. So at this point, let's say good night and to Low Carb Canberra, and we'll see you back at 8:30 tomorrow. By the way, my understanding is that you will all be sent another email with another link, which will work like today, but we don't have the same link for the 2 days. I'm getting the thumbs up from Rob with IT. I know some of us are more challenged by the IT side of things than others.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Let's say good night, Low Carb Canberra.
Good night, Low Carb Canberra.
Well done, team.
We did it.
Shall we leave?
Let's leave now.
I know, it's so weird talking to, and I couldn't even see your heads over the screen, so I'm like,